and deeply involved in moving humanity forward. So that's a heroic role that we play. But I'm also now calling this unleashing the healing and caring spirit of business, because I think these are dimensions that really need to come to the fore right now. Just to give you a little bit of my journey, I've been a business professor for 35 years. And for the first 20 of those years, I was really operating more in the traditional paradigm. I would say I was more what we would call a market warrior, right? We're trying to win in the marketplace, trying to capture market share, maximize profit, shareholder value, that whole narrative of business that has been around for at least 50 years, if not longer. And I really did not resonate with that at a human level. I felt that's a sort of dehumanized business. It treated people as a means to an end. In other words, people only matter to the extent that they help us to make more money. And I believe that business is a deeper and richer activity than that. And especially as a professor of marketing, I had a lot of misgivings about how we actually practiced and how much money we spent on marketing and to what extent were we adding value. So out of all of that, I did about 15 years of research on marketing efficiency, effectiveness, productivity, ethics, all of the challenges that we have. And then I started a project that I was calling In Search of Marketing Excellence. And I said, companies are spending a lot of money. In the US, we spent $1 trillion, $1,000 billion in 2004 on marketing. And that was the GDP of India that year. So I said, how is it that 1 billion people can live on what we are spending on ads, coupons, and junk mail? And yet customer loyalty is falling, customer trust is plummeting, right? Even though spending has gone up a lot. So I said, something is wrong with this picture. There has to be a better way to do business and a better way to practice marketing. So I started a study, I called it In Search of Marketing Excellence. I said, which companies don't spend a lot of money on marketing and yet their customers love them and are loyal and trusting to them? And with that lens, we found a bunch of companies. We found initially about 6 companies, including Whole Foods, which spend 90% less than the industry average on marketing, actually 95% less. And yet they had fanatic customer loyalty and trust. And we started to look at what's common, and we discovered a bigger picture, which is what I'm going to share with you today. We discovered that they cared for not only their customers, but employees loved them, communities, right, all the stakeholders, and they had a reason for being. What we now call a higher purpose, right? So we're going to talk about all of those things. And at the end, we discovered these companies also do very well. So that began a new phase of my life. And I remember the distinct moment when I was writing some of the stories of these companies, the deeply human stories of how they had impacted people, their families, the communities. And I literally was in tears as I was writing. And I told my co-author in our writing retreat in the Poconos in Pennsylvania, I said, David, I have never had tears of joy connected to my work. Think about that for each of you. When did you last have tears of joy at work? Right? I said, I've often had anger and frustration and so forth, but never joy. And now I really came alive. I found that, wow, this is something that I want to understand more and then dedicate the rest of my life to promoting this idea that businesses can be built on love and care and that they can be very successful as well. So that led me to meet John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, who you will be hearing from in a few weeks. And at the end of our day together at dinner, I shared my vision for what I was calling the Institute for New Capitalism, or INC. And I said, John, I've discovered after being a business professor and studying business all these years, I was never taught this approach. And I want to really, this is my vision. I want to make this the normal way of doing business. And he looked at that. He said, that's my vision as well. But I like the phrase conscious capitalism. So that's how we started the movement in 2008. And we're now in about 20 countries and about 40 US cities. And this is really becoming a significant movement. My journey continued, but one of the things that I had observed, and we will talk about a little bit in this program, is that conscious businesses and conscious leaders embody a lot more of what we traditionally refer to as feminine energy. The love, compassion, caring, empathy, inclusiveness, all of those values, which are present in men and women, but historically, business has been a very male energy dominated. It's about winning, it's about competition, right? Aggression, etc. So this book is about how we need to integrate feminine and masculine, both in men and women, right? In order to become whole people and whole leaders. And then a book that I wrote with Bob Chapman. Again, you will be hearing from Bob, CEO of Barry Wehmiller. He's bought 120 companies and turned them around. They were struggling and dying manufacturing businesses in Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and now many European countries as well. And he turned them around by putting people at the center and applying some of the ideas that we talk about here. It's a pretty dramatic story. And then we did a field guide, which is how do you implement these ideas? I think now the world we are moving towards, how do you do this? It's not just why we need to do this, why this is a good idea, right? But how do we do it? And that's the focus of our program and our time together as well. And then the most recent book that came out last year is called The Healing Organization, that business actually can be, and I believe needs to be, a force for healing in the world. And we'll explore those ideas as well here. So if I had to articulate my personal purpose, it is to bring heart, healing, and soul to business and leadership so that we can build a better world for all. You know, the world of business is mostly about the head and it's mostly about the wallet, right? But we need to bring in everything that's in between. Our real humanity has to be part of how we think about and how we practice business. And that's really what my life purpose is, and that's what this movement is largely about. Now, of course, we've been living with this virus. Actually, it's about 1 year anniversary now. I think November 17th was the first person who got infected in 2019. And so obviously it has had a huge and dramatic impact on the world. And it is showing us a lot of things. I think a big part of it is that it's forcing us to take a step back and take a look at what we've been doing, right? And what are our assumptions about life and about business and about what is possible and what is not possible. And we have seen how much we can do when we need to move quickly, how rapidly we can evolve, how much we can cooperate, right? How much we can change the traditional practices. So we're challenging dogma of every kind. And we've been forced to do that, but it just shows us our capacity, right? We're building this capacity now for rapid adaptation, evolution, putting people at the center. And to me, the biggest lesson out of this is reminding us what is our fundamental purpose here in this life, this human life that we have. We human beings are here. What is the deepest source of satisfaction is for us to make a difference in the lives of others, to actually take care of each other. And we are here to take care of each other, and business is a way we can do that at scale. In our ordinary life, we can only care for 5, 10, 15 people at most. But if we start a company, we can have a positive impact, a loving, caring impact on hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people. And that is really, I think, a way to think about business that's very different than the old way, which is that I start a business basically to take care of my own material needs, and I use other people to do that, and everybody is in that business just to meet their own needs. It's a very different mindset, which I think makes a huge difference. Now, before we talk about conscious capitalism, I'd just like to talk about capitalism a little bit, because this is an idea that is not all that well understood or appreciated, even with people who have grown up in it. Because we don't really appreciate that which has existed. We just take it for granted, right? That free markets and free people are the norm. But actually, that has not been the case. So if you look at the economic history of the world the last 2,000 years, and if you look at per capita incomes and adjust them for inflation, it's reasonable methods to do that, you can see that per capita incomes were below $500 per person for most of that time. And from the year 0 to the year 1000, we actually declined in per capita income. Think that was the dark ages, right, around the year 1000. So no progress at all. And 90% of people, 95% of people living on less than $1 a day, living in extreme abject poverty. Life expectancy was 28 to 30 years. The vast majority, 95% of people were illiterate, and they were struggling just to stay alive. And you start to come out of the dark ages into the middle ages, right? We had then the beginning of the Renaissance. We had the invention of printing press. These were big steps forward, of course, for humanity, but they did not actually impact ordinary humans who were still struggling to survive. You go another 200 years, we had the age of reason and enlightenment. We had Isaac Newton, Joseph Galileo, understanding the laws of nature, understanding our place in the universe. Huge leaps ahead, forward for humanity, but no impact again on ordinary humans. What finally changed was a few things that came together in the 18th century, starting in 1750 with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This happened in Scotland first and then spread from there. And this was the biggest technological leap we've ever taken in our history. Suddenly we could mass produce products that were previously produced one by one. And with that gain in productivity, there was a little bit of a gain in prosperity. So that was a huge technological breakthrough, but that itself wasn't enough to really transform society. We also needed an intellectual breakthrough to rethink how human society should be organized. And that's where also in Scotland, we have new respect for Scotland now, right? They gave us the Industrial Revolution, the Scottish Enlightenment, and also a great thinker named Adam Smith, who was a moral philosopher at the University of Glasgow. And he wrote a book called An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, asking the simple question, why is it that some countries prosper, they get rich, and other countries remain poor? And most people would have said it has to do with natural resources or with the work ethic. And he found that did not explain prosperity. He said what does explain prosperity is freedom. Societies that are rooted in greater individual freedom for human beings, where they are able to author their own lives, they're able to pursue their own passions and their own dreams. And then they're able to trade the fruits of their work with each other. If we organize a society around freedom and the ability to trade with each other, that people will sense and meet each other's needs far better than a government or a central planning authority or a monarch can do, right? That this is the idea of the invisible hand of the market, the power of the market to allocate resources, to set prices, and basically to meet people's needs. This was a dramatic intellectual breakthrough at the time. But Europe was not a place where these ideas could really be applied because European society was very stratified, right? You were kind of born into certain sectors and certain guilds and so forth, and there was not a lot of flexibility, and governments really had a lot of power. But that same year, 1776, of course, the United States was born as an idea before it became a country. So as far as we know, it's the only country that exists because of a set of ideas and people who believed in those ideas, which revolved around religious freedom and then political freedom and economic freedom. The founding fathers of the US were really Enlightenment thinkers, right? Having learned from the great Enlightenment thinkers of Europe. And they brought those ideas together into this amazing document, the Declaration of Independence. Right? So where the common person, common man, and it really was limited to man, common man was in charge of his own destiny by right of law, that you could rise from nothing to great heights. You did not have to be born into privilege, into the landed gentry, into the aristocracy, right? And that idea was pretty dramatic. And so with the combination of these things, the technological breakthrough, the intellectual breakthrough, and then the oxygen of freedom that prevailed in the US more so than anywhere else, you saw humanity then take off. And you've seen every indicator of human development just rise dramatically. Per capita incomes have gone up about 1,500% across the world, and much more than that, maybe 6,000% in industrialized countries like the US. Life expectancy has gone from 28 to about 73. Literacy has gone from 13% in 1800 to about 87% now. And the percentage of people living in abject poverty, extreme poverty, has gone from 90% down to below 9%. Before this pandemic. Might have gone up a little bit right now. But you can see dramatic progress, right? Billions of people living longer, fuller, more human lives because of the spread of these ideas that are rooted in freedom and dignity for ordinary people. So again, it's probably one of the most important ideas we've ever had. And we need to remember that, right? What is great and good about capitalism as an idea? Because we also have to look at the reality that we are living in a world right now where confidence in big business is very low and has been declining for quite a long time. You can see it in the US in the data that Gallup collects. Starting in the 70s, confidence in big business has gone down quite steadily. It's about 23% last year. So what does that tell you? 77% of Americans don't trust big business. They do trust small business, but when a company becomes larger, publicly traded, they lose the public confidence. Why is that? Why are people getting cynical about business? You also see data like this, that 88% of Americans feel that they work for a company that doesn't care about them as a human being, that just sees them as a function, as an object in a way, right? You're an accountant, you're a receptionist. Who you are as a human being doesn't matter as long as you can do the job and help us make our bottom line, right? So people feel dehumanized in a way. And then if you look at the economic realities, before this pandemic struck, the US was in an economic boom time by most measures. The stock market was at a record high. Unemployment was below 4%, right? And people were saying, wow, this is great. Everybody's flourishing. No, actually, if you look at the reality of it, that somewhere between 40 to 50% of Americans had less than $400 in the bank. And if they needed $2,000 within 30 days, they would not be able to come up with it. 100 million Americans, about 2/3 of the workforce work hourly jobs, and about 80 million of those live paycheck to paycheck, right? So there's huge economic insecurity. Worker pay has been flat for decades. You can see here over a 40-year period, right? It's been flat while executive pay has gone up dramatically. So this whole, idea of income inequality, which politicians talk about, is actually a real thing. If you just compare Europe and the US, and I'm sure we have data like this in South America, especially in Chile, those gaps are huge, right? But you can see the bottom, the blue lines show the bottom 50% share of the overall income. In the US was about 20, a little below 21%. That has fallen to about 13%. Right? And in Europe, it's fallen from about 24% to about 22%. So it's fallen, but it's much more in the Europe. In US, the bottom 50% has gone down further. And by the same token, the top 1% in the US was less than 11 and is now above 20. And in Europe, it has gone from 10 to about 12. So this is an issue globally, but especially in the US and countries that have followed the US model, right, of extremely free markets, very low regulation, etc., short-term profit maximization as the sort of defining purpose of business, what I would call traditional American-style capitalism, very financially focused and very short-term oriented, almost on a quarterly rhythm, that is no longer working, even for most Americans, which is why you have seen all the unrest out there, right? As Peter Georgescu has said, for the past 4 decades, capitalism has been slowly committing suicide. The rules of the game have become cancers. They're killing us. Why? Because more and more people are getting alienated from that system. More and more people are saying that system doesn't serve me. Right? We're starting to see a divergence between capitalism and democracy, which were really bound together after 1989. The Berlin Wall fell. Capitalism and democracy won over communism and socialism. But over time now, they're seeing us separated. Ordinary people are saying, wow, we are not benefiting, we are not gaining. Actually, our lives are getting hard and harder. So we need to celebrate what capitalism has given us and what it is capable of giving us, right? It can provide widespread prosperity for all, right? But it hasn't really been doing that in the way that we need it to. So we need to celebrate it, but we need to elevate it. We need to think about it at a higher level, apply higher consciousness to it. What we don't want to do is to decimate it. We cannot destroy. We don't want to destroy. If we destroy capitalism, if we continue to see the kinds of things we're seeing, where majority of young people now in the US think socialism would be a better idea. I mean, this is a very dangerous signal, right? First of all, they don't understand what socialism really is. And secondly, it just shows the frustration with business and the way we have talked about and the way we have practiced, right, capitalism, that people are, and then of course, you go down that road and you see countries like Venezuela and others, right? We know that doesn't work. That has been tried 35, 40 times around the world, right? But it indicates the frustration. And you see now the rise of economic unrest and economic populism, right? Chile, as I said, the richest country in South America, but also with the greatest inequality, has gone through significant changes. You see Bolivia and you see, all kinds of places where I think now economic unrest and populism is a bigger force in the world than terrorism, which is what we were obsessed about since 9/11 for the last 20 years. This is now a bigger threat to the established order in societies. And it's a symptom. That's why we have all these populist leaders that are getting elected, because they are tapping into the anger and the frustration and the pain. Of course, they're not providing the solution going forward, right? But they are indicating or looking at the problem. So there is a fundamental rethinking of capitalism that is underway. We've been part of that conversation, but so have many others now. All the major media have been talking about this, from Forbes to Fortune, etc. You saw the Business Roundtable in the US in 2019 issue a statement, the purpose of business not being just economic value creation, which they had talked about for decades, but now focusing on purpose, long-term respect and dignity for all. Davos issuing their declaration around stakeholder capitalism last year. There are lots of indicators of change that are happening. But before we move forward, we need to actually understand where did we go wrong, so that we can move forward in a more thoughtful way. And I believe the single root of this problem is this one idea, shareholder value maximization or profit maximization, as being the only and defining purpose of business. This one idea, I think, has done more harm to the world and more harm to many people than many other ideas. So capitalism has given us benefits, of course, but this idea has caused all of the negative consequences that we have seen. And there's only one purpose of business, and that is to maximize profit. And of course, Milton Friedman in 1970 wrote that famous essay that the only social responsibility of business is to increase its profits, etc. And then we had Jensen and Meckling with agency theory. We incorporated this at the root of the business school curriculum. That we start on day one, the purpose of business, maximize shareholder value. Now, how do we do that, right? But the irony is that ever since about 1970, when this idea became the dominant idea, you can see that overall performance has actually gone down over a 50-year period. Return on assets, which is a reasonable proxy for profitability, has actually declined in that time. So shareholder value maximization has failed even on its own terms of making more money. It has not resulted in businesses being more profitable or more successful. But at the same time, it has also caused harm because we have used people, right? We have used our employees. We have actually tried to get as many customers as possible by saying whatever we need to. Everything in service of profit maximization. We've squeezed our suppliers. We've externalized burdens onto society and the environment in order to maximize profits. And actually, it hasn't worked at any level, really. So we need a new story of business, a story that is inspiring, a story that is engaging, a story that moves us, touches our heart. Calvin Coolidge was the president in the US during the 1920s, a century ago. And that was an interesting time. We were coming out of a pandemic, the Spanish flu. We had ended World War I. The US entered a boom time, the Roaring Twenties it was called, before the Great Depression would hit the end of that decade. But during that decade, Calvin Coolidge made a speech. He said, the business of America is business. And if you think about that, it's really true, right? Because there's no other country that is as rooted in entrepreneurialism as the United States is. American children did not grow up, hoping to get a government job. They had the dream. The American dream was, I'm going to build something and create something, significant in the world. But it does then beg the question, what is the business of business? And for a long time, we have had this idea, which Alfred Sloan, who built General Motors into the largest company in the world at the time, he said the business of business is business. In other words, we need to maximize profits, right? Our job is to, General Motors makes cars, but really we make money. Cars is just the way we make money. And we should make as much money as possible because that's our job as a business. And the government should do their job and universities should do their job and everybody stay in your lane and do your job and we will be fine, right? And I think there's a better way to think about this. And this was expressed by Herb Kelleher, who built Southwest Airlines into the most successful airline in the history of the world and probably one of the greatest companies. Southwest has been around 50 years. This is the first year they will see a decline in profitability in those 50 years. They have been consistently profitable and growing for 50 years. They have never had a single strike in 50 years, even though they're the most heavily unionized airline. They have never laid off a single employee, even after 9/11, right? Even though they're in a very, very cyclical industry. They've never had a single passenger casualty until 2 years ago when there was a freak accident and one person died. Their stock market symbol is love, L-U-V. Their culture is rooted in love and care for people. And they have been dramatically successful. And as Herb Keller said, the business of business is people, yesterday, today, and forever. Just think about that. We have forgotten our primary role here. If everything we do does not lead to human flourishing and planetary flourishing, because the two are connected, then why are we doing anything? What's the point of it? It's like we need a Copernican revolution. Before Copernicus, we thought that the moon and the sun and the stars all revolved around the earth because that's what it looks like, right? But he said, no, actually the earth revolves around the sun and all of that, right? And we have put profit at the center and everything, including people, revolve around profit. And we need to flip that. We need to put people at the center and profits need to serve people, need to serve society, right? Need to serve flourishing of all life. And so that's a fundamental shift that we need to have, a story of business that is rooted in this idea. Because the context for business has changed dramatically. That which used to work doesn't work anymore because the world has changed. We have gone through so much change, especially in the last 30 years. 1989 was a turning point in human history. And in fact, in our book, we said that 1990 was the beginning of the age of transcendence. Because 1989, remember, the Berlin Wall came down, the end of communism, socialism, the spread of freedom and democracy. We had the Exxon Valdez oil spill, so it was the birth of environmental consciousness at a mass scale. We also had the World Wide Web being invented that year, so the spread of information and connectivity, right, in a dramatic way. There's the increase in meaning and purpose that matters to people as we start to age in different societies, right? There are so many changes that have happened. 1989 was also the first year, by the way, in the US we had more women college graduates than we had men, cumulatively. Women are about 60% of all college students, but we had more overall college graduates. We're starting to see a shift towards more feminine energy and more feminine values. So the world has changed and people have evolved. We are changing rapidly. Our IQ is increasing by 3 to 4% a decade for the last 8 decades. We are more intelligent, we are more connected, we are more informed, we are more caring, we are more conscious than we have ever been when businesses have not adapted to the new world. We're still using an operating system for business that was developed in the 19th century. And it was based on the military as the organizing metaphor. Because when we first started having large corporations, the only large entities that existed were armies. So when we said, how do we manage and lead thousands of people, we looked to armies, right? And we say, wow, they use a hierarchical organizational form, right? The general at the top and the soldiers at the bottom and all the levels in between. So we adopted that, and then command and control style of leadership. And then the language of strategy, tactics, operations, front lines, headquarters, staff, line. These are all military terms. So we kind of adopted that. And we've kind of stuck with that, right? The fact is, business is not war. We cannot use a way of thinking and organizing that's rooted in warfare to apply to business. Business is the opposite. Business is about us taking care of each other. It's not about us destroying each other. So we need a new operating system for business. And we have to recognize that we human beings are very different. As I said, we are becoming more conscious. Our entire existence on this planet is one of gradually waking up. Waking up to our own divine potential as human beings, what we are capable of. We are unique. We're the only creature. We have an imagination, right? We have a moral compass. We have a sense of purpose. We can create things that do not exist in the world. So as we wake up, and the reason for that, we were at the edge of survival, 95% living on the edge of survival. So you can't worry about all these higher order things, right? You were simply focused on staying alive. But now billions of people are able to think about life in a deeper way. And we can understand the consequences of our action. If I do this, what will it mean for other people? What will it mean for me in the future? And we have a greater commitment to the truth as we become more conscious human beings. And therefore a finer sense of right and wrong. That which was okay is no longer okay. 150 years ago, there was slavery, right? In the US, in Brazil, in many, many countries, right? And it goes back to every civilization that we've had some form of slavery, right? And society accepted that somehow. And today we cannot imagine that. 100 years ago, women did not have the right to vote. In the US, it was in August of this year, we reached the centennial of that. Now we cannot imagine that. 75 years ago, India was still a British colony. We had colonialism, right? That's another form of slavery. 50 years ago, we had segregation between blacks and whites in many parts of the US. 30 years ago, we had apartheid in South Africa. 20 years ago, there were no rights for gay people. So things are changing. We are evolving. We're waking up. We're also, by the way, living in the most peaceful time in human history. Steven Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, shows there's 90, 95, even 99% decline in many kinds of violence compared to history. We are becoming more inclusive of different ethnicities and religions and races and so forth. And we're learning to live in harmony with nature. So these are all indicators of our consciousness. And as Lincoln said, when so much has changed, how can we continue? The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. As our case is new, we must think anew and act anew. So business as usual is not an option. We need to rethink everything. Why do we exist? As individuals, why do we exist? What's our purpose in life? And as businesses, what do we do in our businesses? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we do it? What's the experience for people who are in our companies? Who are we as leaders? What is our primary motivation? How do we operate? What is our time horizon? Are we thinking 3 years, 5 years, my lifetime, beyond my lifetime? And what is our definition of success? Is it just I die with as much money and power as possible, or is it that I leave behind a legacy, a positive human legacy in the world? So we need to rethink all of the dimensions of business. And that's where the principles, the pillars, the tenets of conscious capitalism come in, asking the 4 fundamental questions: why, what, who, and how. What is the why of business? Well, the answer for a long time has been profit, right? People enter different occupations because they care about different things. That people go into business because they only care about money. Well, that is a very narrow way to think about it. That's not an accurate way to think about it. A lot of Very idealistic people can go into business and change the world because they are trying to do something meaningful, not just make money. The money will follow, the money does come. But that's not why we exist. Right? It's like saying I need red blood cells to live, but I don't dedicate my life to producing red blood cells. I use that to really understand and then implement, achieve the purpose of my life. And every business likewise needs to have its own higher purpose. Why do we exist? And we're going to talk about that in the next 2 sessions, starting next week. What do we do? The old answer is we create value for the owners. We create value for customers, we create products and services that they want, and through that we generate money for our owners, right? But the higher consciousness answer is that we need to have a positive impact on the lives of everybody who's touched by the business, employees, their children, their families, our customers, our communities, right? Our suppliers, our investors, of course, the environment, the planet, other life forms. And we need to create positive impacts on all of those. And we need to create a way in which they're all integrated together so that it's not a trade-off, that we can get a win, 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 win across all of those stakeholders simultaneously. Everybody matters and everybody wins. Who are we as leaders? It used to be somebody who can deliver the numbers, who can raise the share price, right? Bottom line. Well, no, it's a conscious leader who's here to take people to a better place, who's here to mentor, motivate, develop, and inspire people, right? Who sees a vision of what is possible, who's here to serve, not to use people, but to serve people through leadership. And then how does it feel to work here? Traditional cultures are all about performance, all about numbers, all about metrics, but they can be places of a lot of suffering, a lot of stress. Instead, we want to create cultures that are caring, that are trusting, that are joyful, that are fun. Right? So for each of these, and we're going to go through these in detail, I'm not going to spend too much time today on these, but for each of these, I have an acronym that kind of describes the essence of that. So a higher purpose needs to be a healing purpose. It needs to reduce suffering. It needs to bring more joy in the world, right? And enable healthy growth. And then it also stands for the qualities of a great purpose, as we will talk about. Spicy society, partners, investors, customers, employees, and the environment all need to flourish at the same time, right? Conscious leaders are selfless. They're not selfish, right? Because if you're selfish, you're using other people to achieve your goals. That means you're a tyrant, you're not a leader. And then tactile, right? It's something you can feel. So we will spend time on all of these. And the fundamental difference here really is, can you build a business on love and care? Conscious businesses operate with love and care. Traditional businesses only are focused on self-interest. We view human beings as only self-interested creatures who want to maximize their profits, maximize their earnings, right? Conscious businesses know, actually, we are also driven, motivated by love and care. It's a fundamental human need. The human need to care is even more powerful than our drive for self-interest. And can we bring that in? This is the question that the founders of Whole Foods asked, because most businesses run on fear and stress, right? There's a tremendous amount of stress. That's why we have, thank God it's Friday. People live for their time outside of work. Heart attacks are 20% higher on Mondays. Just think about that. Our work is literally killing us. 4 a.m. In Boston, one of the heads of the hospitals told me 4 a.m. Monday morning is the peak of heart attacks. Our work is literally killing us. In fact, 120,000 Americans die every year from stress connected to work. If you don't die, you're bored to death because people are hardly engaged in their work. In the US, which is one of the highest in the world, only 1/3 of people are engaged. Half the people are disengaged, right? And many are actively disengaged. They hate their work. And this is, as I said, better than most countries. Worldwide, it's only 15% are engaged. 85% of people don't care about their work. They're just trying to survive. Right? Think about what that means. It's a huge financial drain. In the US alone, $550 billion a year in lost productivity. But more than that, it's a tragedy. It's a human tragedy, because work is important in our lives, in our human lives. Freud said love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness. And my question was, why can't we combine these two things? Why can't we combine love and work? Why can't we love what we do, love the people we work with, love the customers, right? That everything can be rooted in that. That was the basis for my research, right? As I talked about firms of endearment earlier, companies that people use compassion and love and empathy and caring and soulful and so forth to describe these companies, right? And hence the title firms of endearment. And at the end of that, we did our financial analysis. fully expecting that because these companies are not focused on profit maximization, that maybe they make less money for investors, but they're paying their people much better. Some of them pay double to their frontline workers. Their benefits are much better. They're investing in customer care, investing in their communities, investing in the environment, paying taxes at a higher rate. Maybe there's less money for investors, and what we actually found was that these companies dramatically outperform the market. It was 9-1 in the original set of 28 companies, 7.7 times over 20 years in the larger study we did for the second edition. So these companies are highly profitable, and profits are important. Without profit, society doesn't function. It is socially irresponsible not to be profitable, but it matters how you make the money. Because we can make money by squeezing people and damaging their health and well-being, or we can actually have a positive impact. So businesses create, but we also destroy wealth. And it's not just financial, it's intellectual capital, social capital, right? How much trust and cohesion in society. Emotional well-being, operating from love and care in my life, not fear and stress. Spiritual well-being, having meaning and purpose through my work. Impact on the culture, everything we do with our marketing, etc., impacts how people think about life. Impact on our bodies, impact on the environment. A conscious business tries to have a positive impact in all these areas for all their stakeholders. And a traditional business says we're all about profit maximization, and therefore everything else is a side effect. But I'm sorry, there's no such thing called a side effect. We do things and there are effects. And all of the effects matter. And we need to do business with a spectrum of positive effects. So this kind of captures where we've been in the past, right? The sense of complacency, the sense of otherness, disconnectedness. You know, everybody on this call, we have to recognize we're part of the fortunate people on this planet, right? But the fact is that we are all in the same boat. There are billions of people struggling just to stay alive and dealing with the consequences of what's going on in the world, right? So we have to start thinking in this way. We are all interconnected. We are interdependent with each other. So after, for me, 15 years of research and 12 years of being in the conscious capitalism movement, we recognize that this is for everybody. And that's very important. It has to work for everybody, right? It works because sales grow faster. You know, there's positive word of mouth. People love these companies without even spending anything on marketing. Their margins are better, their net margins, because they have very little marketing spending and very low employee turnover, right? So their gross margins are lower because they're paying their people well, paying their suppliers well, but the net margins are better. Marketing costs are very low. Employee retention, engagement, passion, creativity are way higher. Like 95% passionate commitment. If you look at a company like Southwest Airlines, right, or Patagonia, or some of these conscious companies. Legal costs are lower because they operate in a system of trust. Administrative costs are lower because you don't have a lot of managers telling people what to do. People are self-organizing, self-managing, and self-motivating. They're much more resilient in tough times, as we're going through right now. All of these companies are far stronger in these times, and they promote well-being and flourishing. So it's a way of doing business that everybody matters and everybody wins. And that's important. If somebody is losing in our ecosystem, that means we're not doing it right. So to conclude, humanity is one spirit. We're all interconnected, interdependent. Our planetary resources are finite, and we're running into those limits now. But what's inside us is infinite. Human beings are not a resource. We are the source. We can create extraordinary things, right? But we need to tap into that. And the way we do that is by creating businesses that are built on meaning and purpose, right? That provide joy and a sense of safety and purpose to people. So the opportunity that we have, those of us alive today, can choose to lead the most meaningful lives human beings have ever led, because our challenges are greater than ever. Never before have we faced the prospect of something like climate change and destruction of our ecosystem and our habitat. Right? We're facing dramatic challenges out there. So our challenges are greater, but our ability to do something about it is also greater than ever. We are more intelligent, we're more educated, we're more conscious, we're more caring, we're more connected, but we need to create the organizational structures within which that human seed, which is more powerful than ever, can flourish and can then bring about the future that we all want. So thank you very much. Happy to be with you. And I think we have some time now to take some questions.
So Raj, thank you so much for your presentation. What I would like to do now is to say hi to Neha. She will give a little presentation, and then we can have time for questions if that's okay with you, Raj. That's the way we're going to do it now. Sure. Raj ha dado un resumen de su trayectoria y de los elementos principales del capitalismo consciente que iremos profundizando a lo largo del programa. Conversaremos sobre varios conceptos que son importantes. Ya oyeron ustedes a Raj hablando del propósito, de los tipos de liderazgo, de cultura, de sanación empresarial y, por supuesto, de capitalismo, de su historia, de sus ventajas y también de sus fallas. A Raj lo acompañará la doctora Neha Sangwan. Ella es médica de profesión y es una experta en transformación cultural. Es reconocida en muchos lugares del mundo. Neha, welcome. Thank you for accepting this invitation from Grupo Bancolombia. It's a pleasure having you here with us. Good morning, Neha. How are you?
Oh. Good morning, and thank all of you for being here and for inviting me. It's an honor. Hold on, and I will share my screen now. And I just need to check that you can see me and you can see the slides. Yes?
We're seeing the slides now, Neha. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Raj. Every time I hear you, I learn something new. And today, the relevance of what you speak of is so palpable. And part of the experiences are the norms of our society, the rules and the institutions crumble in our world. As a leader, you may be experiencing that you normally are the one initiating change, but now it's really an amount and pace of change that you are not initiating at all. And in that space, what we're going to speak about today, my background is as a mechanical engineer as well as an internal medicine physician. So I'll come from the practical angle of leadership as well as the biological underpinning of how you as a human are affected by these types of changes and how they show up in your leadership. And once we learn a few tools today, the idea is that you will become even more effective in working with your biology during times of uncertainty. So let's start with the world is triggered. And by triggered, you may notice that yourself, those you lead and those you love may be reacting out of proportion to what they normally are. So maybe something in a meeting is said and they react completely out of proportion and you might not understand why. What I'm here to tell you as a doctor is it's biological. So we're going to go through some ideas as they relate to your leadership during these uncertain times. I'm going to explain the science underneath them, and then we'll move into some ideas around some tools that you can use to actually help work with your biology, almost unhook from your own biology and understand better your teams and those you lead. So the first one is called an amygdala hijack. And this is what happens when someone behaves in a fashion that's out of proportion to what was just said or what happened. It's when people feel triggered, when they're in a heightened sense of experiencing something that almost feels traumatic to them, but to other people, it seems quite normal. And so an amygdala hijack, let me explain to you how this happens in your brain. This is a side view of the brain. And data starts coming in. It comes in externally from the outside world. You receive an email, someone says something in a meeting, or they become silent and they're not participating.
Sorry to interrupt you. We are not seeing your presentation. Could you share the screen again, please?
Sure. You're not seeing my presentation, so let me do that again.
Okay, thank you, Neha.
Now we are. Now
we're seeing it below, yeah.
You are seeing it now? And tell me what you see.
No, now
I think it's gone. It's gone again.
I'm still not seeing it.
Nothing.
Okay, I'm going to do it again. Otherwise, I will have the main tech team control it if it doesn't work this time. Is it showing?
Yes, it is.
Yes, now it is.
I'm actually going to leave it with the thumbnails on the side just for a moment. Is that okay?
Yes,
I will
yes,
leave it there.
It is okay.
Let me just talk you through it one step at a time. So the amygdala hijack is a phenomenon, a biological phenomenon that happens in your body when, look at the red arrows, when incoming data comes in first from both your external world as well as your internal physiology. What I'm talking about is either seeing somebody or hearing somebody make a comment in a meeting, receiving an email, that's your external world. Then the internal world, what I'm speaking about as you get data, is your heart racing, your stomach turning. Let's talk about how, for me, just now, 1 second ago, my heart started racing. Like, what? You can't see my presentation? That's internal data. As it all comes in, it meets a part of your brain called the thalamus. The thalamus is a hub. It's like when, an airline has their hub in Mexico City and all planes land there and then they're rerouted someplace else. It's called a hub. It's the thalamus. All data comes in. What happens next is it moves to the green portion, which is the frontal cortex. All the data now integrated is moving to the frontal cortex so that you can make sense of what just happened. There are many ways people make meaning of the data that they're receiving, and that determines, now come down to the amygdala, the purple one, that determines how you feel. All strong emotion, previous trauma, it's all stored in that purple area in the amygdala. The amygdala are two almond-shaped organs, and they're eavesdropping on the thalamus, where all the data is coming in. And this is not by mistake. Your brain's most basic function is to keep you safe. So keep you safe, so you seek pleasure and avoid pain, right? It's looking to keep the human safe and allow them to seek pleasure, okay, and avoid pain. In that instance, the amygdala's job is very important. If there is something that has caused pain in the past, something that has startled you in the past, it is stored there, even if you don't remember it, even if you were too young to remember it. So the amygdala now is placed right next to the thalamus. So, for example, when you were very, very young, you don't remember it. You got bit by a dog. You don't remember this experience, but your amygdala does. 50 years later, you're walking into a friend's home for a gathering, and they're holding a similar type dog, and you react, oh my gosh. And then you'll both get a good laugh. You won't know why you were so surprised. And the host will say, what, are you afraid of this little guy? He's harmless. But when you jump, when you react, it's because the incoming data that's coming into your thalamus just got hijacked by the amygdala. You were not able to have it route to your frontal cortex to make meaning of it. In fact, you've been hijacked, and it's so that your body wants you to respond and protect yourself from danger. This is what's happening in our world right now. So sometimes very high-functioning teams are breaking apart. They're reacting. They're having emotional experiences with each other. They're not performing at the level that they normally are. And it's due to being hijacked. So now you have a term that you can understand biologically, that their amygdala is hijacking them and not allowing them to make sense of what's happening. When this happens, the most important thing for you as a leader to do is to notice that someone in a meeting or on your team or yourself has been hijacked. In that instance, it's very important for you to be aware of it when it happens, soften your body because it will be very tense and reactive. Soften your body, feel gravity pulling you down. Take a slow, deep breath, softening your abdomen, relaxing into this, and say, wow, I just reacted to that experience. Just give me a few moments and we can continue. Or I need to walk outside, get some fresh air. I'll be right back. Whatever it is, it's your knowledge that this is happening. If it's happening to someone else, just make sure that you acknowledge. It sounds like that's really important to you. Let's all take a moment to pause and we'll regroup. So this amygdala hijack experience is not one to that should get you to move to anger quickly or upset. It's more of an awareness that someone is triggered and their biology is trying to keep them safe. It should be happening likely more often in our world today. I'm going to try to play my screen again. Can you see this?
Yes,
we can.
Neha, we can.
You can. Great.
Yes.
I'm back to full screen. So a very important piece of this is, as a leader, you've gotten to the place that you've now come because you are very good at focusing outward in the world. You see a problem, you want to solve it. You have these big dilemmas in the world, and you are the one in charge of that. What has often gotten the back seat and gone by the wayside is our inner world as we created that. And now we're moving as a world from not only accomplishment, but also as a leader from accomplishment to fulfillment. And in that space, it's very important that you start getting the most subtle signals that your body is giving you. Normally, these were signals when you felt your heart racing, deadline, you have to make it over a deadline. The important thing there was to bulldoze over all of these signals, to actually override them in order to get the external goal to happen. What we're talking about now in conscious leadership as part of conscious capitalism is that now it's time to tune inward as you tune outward. We're going to start expanding your vision. And so your body's signals, the ones that might slow you down, tell you you're tired, tell you it's going to be difficult to make this deadline, those are actually going to be valuable in your decision making. So take a moment to look on the screen at what we call the body map and recognize the unique way that your body speaks to you. For me, some of the most subtle ways I know in a meeting that something has changed, or I'm not saying exactly what I want to say because I'm concerned about the politics of it, or that I might be, creating conflict. Often what happens for me is that my throat constricts and my stomach starts turning. That's my body's unique way of speaking to me. I'd like you to take a moment, and each of you just think, when you just move outside your comfort zone, when something changes or doesn't seem quite right, how does your body let you know that that is true? So you can write in the chat if you'd like, or make a mental note of it. We'll be exploring this further. But this is not the same thing. First, we did the amygdala hijack, which was the extreme version of how your body hijacks you. The body map is the more subtle version of the physiology inside you that's going to give you important clues in time of uncertainty, anxiety in the world, to give you guidance when the external world may not be giving you that. Now, the normal inclination until now has been to figure out a way to get rid of this signal. And one of the many ways I did this as a physician who was required to stay in the hospital for 36 hours straight and take care of patients, my well-tested formula to numb out this body map was 2 ice cold 16-ounce Mountain Dews plus a king-size Snickers bar, and you could keep me up for 36 hours straight taking care of patients in situations of life and death. What I am certain is, not only do each of you have your own body map, the unique way that your body communicates with you, but you also will have a way that you can override that's unique to you. And it may be the way that mine was, which was the sugar, caffeine, buzz strategy to get me through. It might be the snooze it off strategy. You might have that 20-minute nap, or a way that you can reset your bodies. Maybe it's the Netflix binge strategy. It might be the kick into overdrive, work even harder strategy. Or you may be someone who needs to move your body in order to get the sensation to go away. What's most important here is that you can recognize the signals coming from your body and the ways that you have mastered to override them. We will go into deeper explanation of this and strategies around how to change all of this moving forward in our program. Today is more of an introduction. And so let's talk a little bit about, I was thinking which emotion is the most prevalent right now and which one's the most important in our world. And yes.
I'm sorry, I think the presentation is not, are you done with the presentation or?
No,
because we're not seeing,
I forwarded it. Can you see it now with the thumbnails next to it?
I think we can't. There is a wide screen and that's it.
Okay, I'm unclear what's happening, so I'm going to move out of this and I'm going to try sharing it again and leave it with the, oh, thank you. It looks like the tech team is going to help me out here.
Yes, they have it, so they can do it for you.
Thank you. So please go to slide 6, which is anxiety. And under anxiety, it's a build.
Diapositiva 6.
So as I was thinking about what is the most important emotion that I can help either you manage with yourself currently in the world or help you lead with those you lead in love. Anxiety is what came to mind as one of the predominant emotions right now that we can lead into. Move much deeper into, anger, tears, any of the other emotions that we need to talk about. Today, we're going to focus on anxiety. We're going to start with number 1, which is what emotion is anxiety rooted in? First of all, before I say that to each of you, I also want to say some of you may be thinking to yourself, I don't get anxious. I get stressed really well. What I'd like you to think about for a moment before we move into this is oftentimes high-level leaders and CEOs, the way that anxiety shows up for them is in an unusual way. They might feel distracted. They can't focus, right? So notice if any of these show up. If you're quick to anger, if you find yourself up at night, ruminating on certain topics and worried. So worry, distracted, these words might be a better what this feels like or manifests in you as some anxiety. We're going to talk about what this is, and then we're going to talk about an effective way to unhook from your biology so you can make effective decisions. So let's start here. Anxiety is rooted in fear. And the reason we get anxious is actually a lack of self-trust in ourselves that we can handle what comes next. It may be a new situation. It may be unprecedented times like we're in now. Anxiety is, go ahead to number 3. What anxiety is it's a failed attempt to control the future. So anxiety and fear creep in. When we're in these unprecedented times, we've never experienced something before, and we don't trust ourselves to handle what comes next. That's when the physiology in our body from our body map will show up with heart racing, stomach turning, sweating, whatever those signals are for you. Number 4. Common judgments that people have, leaders have about anxiety, that it's a sign of weakness, that somehow this person's overly emotional, that they can't handle it. These are not true. What emotions are in fact our inner GPS system that guides us before anyone else knows what's happening. It's information. And as the world becomes more chaotic, this is more and more important information for you to be able to lead effectively and make effective decisions, especially in uncertainty. Number 5. How do you heal anxiety? So oftentimes people talk about these issues. What I want you to know that's going to be different in this program is when we speak about a topic, we then will go into practical ways to change it. So the next slide, please. Let's talk about a way to heal anxiety. Since anxiety and fear is about a failed attempt to control the future, something that is not yet happened, the very first thing you must do is get present in your body. And if you're someone who thinks that, oh, I've tried breathing, I've tried meditation, when I try it, all I get are racing thoughts in my mind. It doesn't really help me. What I'd say is, if you're a runner, maybe it's active movement in your body that grounds you, right? Walking, running. But what needs to happen for your anxiety to heal? One of the most important things is for you to first get present in your body. And the way you do that right now, right here, soften, take your shoulders, scrunch them up to your ears, and then just relax them. Let them move down. Soften your abdomen so that when you breathe in, your abdomen softens and expands with the air that's entering. Feel gravity pulling you down on the chair, your feet on the floor. That's how you get present in your body. Once we get present, the next thing I would ask you to do is, if you have a piece of paper right next to you, it's easy to just jot down, what is it that keeps you up at night? Name that fear. When you're worried, when you're up at night, what is it that's running through your mind over and over again? Can you name it? So take a moment. If you have something right next to you, please jot that down. What I'm most afraid of is, what if ... and fill in the blank. Next, number 3 is expand your perspective. So now what we've done is we've taken your fear and your anxiety, your worry out in the future. We've gotten you present in your body. Now we've taken that fear and we've also written it down. When you write it down, you make it present in the present moment so you can see it and you name it. Now it's time to go underneath that and expand your perspective. What you do there is you ask yourself the question underneath, what if I get sick with COVID? What if I can't lead? Whatever your fear is, underneath it, you want to write, today, right here, right now, what I know is. So let's say my fear was that I will get sick. I will get COVID and not be able to lead my team. Underneath it, I would write, today, right here, right now, I am healthy, right? So now what you've done is you've taken your fear, you brought it into the present moment, you've expanded your perspective to the truth right here, right now. Number 4 is it's time to reprogram your thinking. Neuroscience teaches us that when we repeat thoughts over and over again, they become neuronal pathways that are ingrained in our brain and in our leadership. One way to disrupt this quite quickly is to come up with a short, accessible affirmation phrase that disrupts and changes the way you're thinking. So if my fear was, what if I get COVID and cannot lead my team? And then I did today, right here, right now, I am healthy. To reprogram my thinking, I may come up with a statement that is this simple: I am whole, healthy, and well. And so now when I notice myself on the repeat loop of the thought that I'm afraid, that I have anxiety, that I'm worried about something happening, I insert, I am whole, healthy, and well. And I can gradually interrupt that pathway. Next. Following that, you want to ask yourself the most important question. I spoke to you earlier about how anxiety and worry result from a lack of self-trust. So you want to ask yourself, once you've grounded yourself and gotten clear about the current danger that you're in or not, you want to ask yourself for the next decision, what would self-trust and courage do now? And the next thoughts that come to you after that are the right ones. So this is something that we would need to work. We will pay some more attention to and work. You can work through on your own in your workbook, the electronic workbook that you got. There's a full page on this where you can work through each of these experiences unique to your concerns. Next slide, please. Now it's about decision making. Before we can make clear and effective decisions, we have to be able to unhook from our biology. If you know that you're feeling triggered, we talked about the amygdala hijack and how to pause and regroup there biologically. That may take a little more time. Then we spoke about tuning into your body map. And those are more subtle signals, but how important it is that you don't override them and miss the early signals. Now, as we move into triple vision, now you're going to hit 3 times. And the first and most important thing in making good decisions is that you expand from focusing on yourself, triggered, anxious, whatever it is, to now, go ahead, 2 more times, please, forward. That you first focus on yourself as a leader, leading yourself. Once you've unhooked from your own anxiety, you know the discomfort in your body or your amygdala hijack, now you can expand to each decision you're making, including you, now keep going, but ultimately expanding to include the next level, up, keep going, please, and 2 more. You will have a much stronger base in order to focus on we and the world. This is the piece that Raj just spoke to you about stakeholder integration, that you're paying attention not just to your bottom line, what you need to make for next quarter's earnings, but also that you're paying attention to all of your customers, your employees, your suppliers, your investors, et cetera, as well as your impact in the world. Next slide. This is a simple grid to help you with decision making, because not only on the y-axis there is what is happening for you in this moment now, also for the we, right, your teams, everyone else, and your community. But what's important here in this decision making grid is that you look at it over time, because oftentimes in times in the world like this of uncertainty and unprecedented times, sometimes things are a little painful now in order to show benefit in the short term and the long term. So as you sit down to make some of these difficult decisions, please make sure you take into account all 9 of these boxes before you weigh your decision, before you choose what comes next. And the idea here that we will be exploring over the next few months together is, how do we do this when we think there's only trade-offs? How do we create a win-win for ourselves and each other, not only now, but over time? So thank you for this, and thank you for your time. We look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thank you, Neha. A great presentation, and I think we now can have 10 minutes for Raj and Neha to answer a couple of questions. So if any of you have any questions, please raise your hand. Digo que tenemos unos 10 minutos para hacer preguntas. Veo que Manuel Esteban Acevedo está levantando la mano. Manuel Esteban, pon tu micrófono activo y, por favor, ¿a quién le quieres preguntar? ¿A Raj o a Neha? Gracias.
Thank you so much. I would like to address this question to Raj. Raj, I work for a public-owned company, and I feel that all these elements that you have presented us today fit very well within the scope of a public-owned company. However, I would like to ask you if in your research you have seen some differences or some patterns that are of importance when you take these activities or when you undertake these changes within a public-owned company, in which shareholders take a completely different meaning, in when stakeholders, the scope and the amount and the expectations they have certainly are different when you talk about private-owned companies.
Yeah, so it's definitely very possible for a public company to operate as a highly conscious company. We have many, many examples of that, from Costco to Whole Foods to Southwest Airlines and many, many others. Um, it can be a little more challenging just because the nature of our financial markets in the past, and it's starting to change a little bit now, but it was more short-term focused and very somewhat myopic, I would say. So the key element there is really having the right investors, right? So treating your investors as stakeholders and making sure that they understand what is your purpose, what are your core values, how do you operate, what's your business model, etc., so that they are invested in you for the long term. I think the key challenge that happens is when we don't differentiate between investors and speculators. The people who buy your shares today and sell them tomorrow, you don't owe them any real loyalty. But the ones who are actually investing, who are trying to bring about some legacy, some impact, right? So investors who not only care about returns, but about impact and about the legacy that they're leaving. Those are the investors we have to be in deep relationship with. And it requires constant communication, right? And it requires a matching of time horizons. So they also have a similar time horizon to us. So I think those are some of the elements. We have to communicate our purpose, we have to communicate our values. Why do we exist? Who are we? How do we operate? What is our philosophy? How do we create value? And all of that messaging is something that the right investors will respond to, but also the right potential employees, customers, suppliers, all stakeholders will resonate with that overall message. So it requires clarity internally in terms of values and purpose, and then constant communication and maintaining strong relationships, especially with the large institutional investors, so that when something happens in the external world, I remember I was in 2008 when we had our first Conscious Capitalism conference, and that was the financial crisis, as you remember. Just coincidentally happened that we launched at that time. And Whole Foods stock had been as high as 70. And when we had our Conscious Capitalism conference, it was down below 7. And I said to John, I said, how come you look so relaxed? I mean, you're a public company CEO, your stock is down 90%. He said, well, I think the market is overreacting. We're still the same company. Our sales are down a little bit, but we'll come back. Which is, when bad news happens, the overall market, overreacts on both directions when good news happens as well. But what they did was they stayed in close contact with T. Rowe Price and other long-term institutional investors who basically said, we believe in you, we believe in what you're trying to do, right? We're not going to jump ship and bail in these tough times. So continue doing what you're doing, and it's going to be all right. So they were able to ride through that, and within 3 years their stock was at 120, up from $6. So having those kinds of relationships gives you that stability. Now, having said that, if you fast forward to just a few years ago, the market had changed in the way that we have all these private, the activist investors now, especially in the US, right? And Whole Foods got attacked because their share price had fallen by about 40%, and they got attacked by two different activist investors, Jana Partners and one other. And they put so much pressure on them, and they were threatening to issue proxies. They say you need to fire the majority of your board members, you need to lay off 25,000 employees, you need to put yourself up for sale to Kroger or Publix, etc. And if you don't do that, then we're going to, or else, they said, you must do all of this by Monday or else. And so, that became almost like a threat. And that is why John had to fly to Seattle and talk to Amazon almost as a white knight. So I think that's one of the structural problems in our financial system is short-term investors, the activist investors are given a lot of power to affect change. And, just by buying 9.5% of the shares, they can issue proxies. So some of the structural reforms that are starting to happen now, there's a new long-term stock exchange that has been approved recently in the US, where your voting power as an investor depends on how long you've held your shares. Right? So if you buy today, tomorrow you have no ability to really impact the business. But if you've been invested for a long time, then you do have the ability to have a say. So I think those kinds of structural reforms are also needed, because otherwise what's happening, that our public markets are becoming quite hostile in many ways to long-term, holistic, way of thinking. And the number of public companies has gone down 40 or 50% in the last few decades. And many companies are choosing to go private. Like Panera Bread, which was one of the most successful companies in the food industry, 4,000% returns over 25 years, said, I'm going to take it private because I don't know after I'm gone what's going to happen to this company with all the pressure that comes from the outside, right? So I think there's need for structural reform there to make sure that we can have a thriving market of publicly traded companies so we can invest our pension funds and all the other things we need to do that are able to be aligned with society in a deeper way. Because that's really, right now, there's a bit of a disconnect. But I'm optimistic that actually, given the actions of BlackRock and Larry Fink and State Street and Vanguard, which collectively control about 15 trillion of assets, and they are all now talking about long-term stakeholder orientation and purpose. I think that the financial market is starting to move in that direction.
Okay, thank you, Raj. Quien preguntaba fue Manuel Acevedo Jaramillo. Él es el presidente del Instituto Colombiano de Crédito Educativo y de Estudios Técnicos en el Exterior, que es el ICETEX, que es una entidad del Estado en Colombia, para los que están por fuera de Colombia. Y tengo espacio para una pregunta más. Vamos a El Salvador. Diego de Sola quiere preguntar. Diego, por favor, el micrófono es suyo. ¿Y para quién va la pregunta? ¿Para Raj o para Neha?
I'm going to, Raj, if you'd be so kind, I'm going to try to be very brief, but I'm a little bit, I've been pushing in this vein for a long time, somewhat unsuccessfully. I think we're now being certified as B corporations, a few of the companies that we run, but the only reason we're doing it is because of our own conviction. And I think for Latin America, I wanted to throw this in just because I think hopefully it might give us a little bit of an angle for the seminar. Latin America, you know, I want to be a little bit politically incorrect, if you guys will allow me. You know, white rich men have dominated since the colony. And so we really had never had distinct social mobility. You know, entrepreneurship has never really been the way it has been in the US. And so I think that there's a structural injustice that's in our system and that none of us are really sure, at least I certainly am not sure, how to tackle. And so within the public, you have a sort of learned helplessness, you know, and an inherent distrust. And so when we sit at the table with people in politics or whatever in power, you know, they say if you don't have a seat at the table, you might be on the menu. But nowadays, what we're seeing is with more authoritarian governments, you only have a seat at the table because the leader of the day invites you, not because the public thinks you as a business person or a business leader should be there because they don't believe you're acting in their best interest. And so, and then at the same time, my concern is I see the business community, and again, I hate to generalize, so I apologize, and I'm sure that this is not the case in this call, but generally speaking, people think that, you know, when you talk about idealism, people think you're stupid, you know, because the reigning rule of law here is pragmatism. And so I feel like we're hitting ourselves against the wall all the time. And I feel a certain degree of self-satisfaction because we say we're socially responsible because it's been in vogue for 10 years. But in the end, you know, if the government comes tomorrow to shut my company down, I really wonder who's going to stick up for me. You know, and there's very little empresas polar, you know, and so my concern is just that I think that Latin American context is providing a very challenging situation for us to really legitimize enlightened self-interest and legitimize business as such. I feel a very big concern. So I would love to hear from you guys and from my colleagues, especially, how we create a need that I don't think is there in the majority of the private sector. I don't think that need is really, and the consumers aren't really like in the US either, not nearly as much anyway, right? So I think we're eons behind, and that really presents a really important challenge. So that's, sorry for the long intervention, but that's just getting off chest.
Thank you, Diego. That's a very, very important issue and a thoughtful question, you know. And I don't have a simple, easy answer. I think, to me, broad change at the level that we're talking about requires collective action. And I think the hope coming out of this kind of an experience with 100 powerful leaders is that we form a collective. You know, there's this sort of the courage that comes from not being alone and being part of a larger collective, that we actually can then stand together in unity to espouse certain principles, certain ways of operating, a certain vision, and a shared commitment to that. And that's one of the goals towards the end of this program, that we come up with something that all of us adhere to, believe in, subscribe to. And in that being together, I think there's collective courage to be able to stand up to governments, to be able to provide a vision that society, and potential employees and customers and others can think about business and respond to good business in the right way. So I think that's really part of the vision that we have to create. And I think that's not an easy process. As you've said, there's a lot of legacy there. There's a lot of history. There are built-in structural reasons why the status quo continues the way it is. I would be interested in hearing if Juan Carlos has any thoughts on that, because I think that is part of the vision here. So would you think on that?
Yes, Raj, sure. Diego, I agree with you that we have a system in Latin America that it's kind of moves and emphasize on some privileges, and that gap it's widened. So the idea of sharing these kind of thoughts here, it's to see how to move forward. And I don't know what are your thoughts about, but it's really difficult. I think we are all convinced at this point of the game, we are all convinced that we need to do something and change, but move forward and do something that really meaningful, that change structurally our society, the way we do business is so hard. That's why I said at the beginning that it is important to be, and Raj just said that, to move on a collective way, not being isolated efforts, but more a collective movement based on conviction, but on actions that all of we can do together on that direction, because it's the only way. If we do it on an individual level, it's going to take too long and probably we're going to fail. But if we do it on a collective way, I think we can really, really change the way our societies work, which is at the end what we are looking to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Thank you, Raj.
Bueno, a medida que se van sumando el resto de nuestros invitados, yo voy a hacer una presentación muy corta de cada uno de los facilitadores. Ustedes conocieron a uno de los facilitadores en el grupo que les correspondió, pero seguramente no han tenido ocasión de conocer a los otros facilitadores. Quiero empezar con la doctora Alice Cortés. Ella es consultora de gestión enfocada en el propósito, es conferencista, es presentadora de radio, colega mía, y científica social con base en Dallas, en Texas, en Estados Unidos. Es además la autora de Purpose Ignited, cómo los líderes inspiradores desatan la pasión y elevan la causa. Quisiera que la doctora Alice nos contara muy brevemente, en unos pocos segundos, qué concluyó de su sesión, qué le pareció y si hay algo en especial que quisiera resaltar antes de seguir con los otros facilitadores que hemos tenido en la sesión de hoy. Alice, ¿estás por ahí?
Sí, estoy aquí. Me voy a hablar en inglés, ¿está bien?
Sí, por favor, you can speak in the language you prefer. It's fine.
It will be faster and cleaner. So to recap what we spoke about in our group, a strong takeaway was what we got from Neha, to the importance of getting present and stepping back and really understanding what we're looking at here. That was something the group brought up with. There was just an overall fascination with the transformation to conscious capitalism, and really, I would say, an inspiration that we're all part of this effort together. And the group was inspired by the role that companies can play in stewarding this move, and how it can improve the quality of life of all people. That was really something that was set upon them. There's a few of the people in my group who are in the process of moving to get B certified. They're inspired by the idea that purpose-led companies can attract higher level talent. A really, really big concern registered by a couple of the people in the group is this importance of addressing the problem that the millennial generation has, distrusting capitalism, and that need to really be in a conversation with them to understand what their concerns are, because socialism is not an option. And that another important point is that what we are embarking on together to transport business to serve all stakeholders is incredibly complex, and we need to come together as countries across the world to steward this future.
Okay, Dr. Liz, thank you so much. We'll have an occasion to hear from you again later on. Carolina Leñero es especialista en cultura consciente y en liderazgo. Es actualmente la jefe de cultura de Atlas Renewable Energy y una de las fundadoras del Capitalismo Consciente de Costa Rica. Carolina, tienes unos segundos para hacer lo mismo que hizo la doctora Alice. Si quieres hacerlo en español, or if you rather do it in English, it's fine. It's your choice. Hola, Carolina.
Hola, Jorge, muchas gracias. Lo haré en español porque mis notas están en español.
Perfecto.
Definitivamente en nuestro grupo hubo un reconocimiento importante acerca de, y también una realización importante acerca de lo que el capitalismo, como lo entendíamos, ha generado temas de inequidad, lo que hablaba Alice anteriormente, estas manifestaciones masivas que se han dado especialmente en los centennials y millennials, y cómo en la época de COVID además nos da esta nueva oportunidad de preguntarnos quiénes somos, quiénes queremos ser. Hay un reconocimiento de que hoy en día los líderes no son como eran antes, no tienen que verse como perfectos, sino que tienen la posibilidad de adquirir nuevas herramientas, nuevas habilidades, el reconocimiento de que los negocios no es solamente hacer dinero por hacer dinero, sino también lograr negociaciones que beneficien al todo, esta realización de que si yo como líder quiero explotar a mis empleados, entonces mis empleados van a querer explotarme a mí ganando el salario y haciendo menos trabajo, y lo mismo con mis proveedores, y que si lo hago de una manera distinta también empiezo a generar ese espiral positivo de abundancia colectiva. Y también muy potente dos otros temas que son la posibilidad de hacerlo juntos y cuánto nos ahorraríamos tanto a nivel personal como colectivo si manejáramos bien nuestras emociones.
Carolina, gracias. Ahí, a propósito de lo que empezabas diciendo, una de las cifras que más me impactó de la presentación que hizo Rush es la presentación de que en Estados Unidos el 88% de la gente cree que los lugares en los que están, las compañías en las que trabajan, no se preocupan por ellos. Eso es muy, muy impactante. Quiero seguir con Fernando Oria, espero haber dicho bien su apellido. Es miembro del Comité Ejecutivo del Capítulo de Capitalismo Consciente de México y es cofundador y jefe de entrenamiento en STEM para Niños México y en Mind the Gap. Hola, Fernando.
Hola, Jorge, muchas gracias. Bueno, en nuestro grupo hubo un par de cosas que se repitieron consistentemente, que fueron muy interesantes. Una de ellas es una orientación muy fuerte hacia todos los stakeholders que rodean a los negocios, pero con un enfoque muy particular en los colaboradores, una preocupación muy palpable en la gente que trabaja en cada uno de los negocios y las cosas que se tienen que hacer para que ellos estén, digamos, cómodos y sintiéndose plenos en el espacio de trabajo. Creo que esa es una de las que fue más recurrente. Otro tema bien importante que salió es que si bien se reconoce claramente que hay una necesidad de cambiar y el primer paso para articular este cambio es empezar a poner las palabras sobre un papel y decir, este es nuestro propósito, hacia acá nos queremos dirigir. El reto principal está cómo convertir las palabras en acciones, ¿no? Y eso implica, por un lado, pues empezar con todo este walk the talk, ¿no? Que no todo se quede en palabras, sino que se tengan herramientas prácticas para poder tomar esas acciones, y para ello reconocieron como increíble la herramienta del Triple Vision que presentó Neha, ¿no? Fue como muy ilustrativo para ellos, como un primer paso para ir hacia adelante.
Gracias. Gracias a Fernando, y sí, es que las organizaciones también tienen que aprender a curarse, y si eso ocurre, pues seguramente se va a curar también la gente que trabaja en ellas. Sigo con Jorge Bianchi, es cofundador de Capitalismo Consciente en Chile Hay muchos acentos acá, maravilloso. Ha sido consultora en el espacio de negocios conscientes durante 20 años y es fundador y socio gerente de Evolve App. Jorge, hola, buenos días, tardes ya casi.
Muchas gracias, Jorge Tocayo.
Tocayo, sí.
Cada vez que te han dicho tu nombre, giro a ver si soy yo.
Sí, me pasó lo mismo también.
En nuestro grupo, expresión de agradecimiento a la invitación, esta convocación, estas sesiones de parte de Grupo Bancolombia. Habían representación de industria de construcción, inmobiliaria, alimentos, fiduciaria, agropecuaria, consumo, países representados en actividad desde México hasta Perú, incluso Chile y el Caribe, algunos con operaciones en Chile y en el Caribe. Y cosas que se resaltaron de lo compartido por Rach y por Nija, es bueno, el ver de forma tan contundente que trabajar en sostenibilidad no es suficiente, que se hace muy necesario equilibrar los intereses de los shareholders con una mirada más amplia de stakeholders, ir atendiendo a todos los grupos de interés y sobre todo en nuestros países donde hay mucha desigualdad y bueno, donde la condición de pandemia también ha generado más presión aún. Rescatábamos también de lo compartido por Nija el qué fácil pone ella el poder manejar mejor nuestra ansiedad y decíamos, bueno, que así de sencillo, ojalá lo logremos. Y también el poder equilibrar las decisiones de corto plazo y de la hora con el impacto que tienen en el largo plazo. Nos desafiamos en algunos minutos más que teníamos a qué podíamos hacer como grupo a lo largo de todas estas sesiones y la gran convergencia iba hacia comunicar de forma contundente y a través de más colaboración más allá de nuestras empresas sobre cómo este sistema de capitalismo necesita ajustes y cómo ha ido trayendo beneficios, pero efectivamente necesita evolucionar con un nuevo lente para poder entregar mucho más en nuestras sociedades. Alguno decía, quitémosle el micrófono a los políticos, hablar también la gente de empresas. Gracias.
Gracias, Tocayo. Jorge Bianchi, cofundador de Capitalismo Consciente en Chile. También tenemos como facilitadora a Lucía Egea Ronda, es la directora general de Contenedor Blanco, una consultoría de propósito con sede en España, que fundó después de una carrera de 20 años en EdTech, finanzas y desarrollo de negocios. Lucía, buenas tardes. ¿Cómo fue tu experiencia? Hola.
Hola, buenas tardes aquí, Jorge, gracias. La verdad es que ha sido una experiencia maravillosa. ¿Qué puedo decir? Me sumo a lo que mencionaba hace un segundo Jorge, Bianchi, tu tocayo. Representación de hospital, de administración pública, de metro de Medellín, de bolsa de valores. Al final es una amalgama de empresas, de productos, de servicios que te hacen tener una visión muchísimo más 360, ¿no?, de la realidad que estamos viviendo. Yo me quedaría y destacaría un par de frases que han sido rotundas durante las presentaciones. La primera es la de la coherencia entre el pensar, el decir y el hacer. Todos somos muy buenos en el ámbito de la teoría, pero ahora hay que ponerlo en práctica. Esta es fundamental. La segunda, el reto de ser persona, ¿no? ¿Cómo puedes de verdad conseguir? De hecho, una anécdota curiosa fue en la presentación, aunque íbamos marcándoles el tiempo, evidentemente, por las 12 personas, 30 minutos, ¿no? Todo este estrés. La gente se presenta, las personas nos presentamos siempre en nuestro ámbito profesional y no en el personal. Fue buenísimo cuando abrimos esa segunda parte, ¿no? Y cuando empezamos a compartir, pues que casi todos compartimos también otras cosas, hijos, adolescentes, problemas del día a día, situaciones familiares complicadas y la verdad es que ahí creo el caldo de cultivo y el sitio donde vamos a poder crear y construir mucho juntos en las próximas sesiones. Muchas gracias.
Muy bien. Por favor, gracias a ti por acompañarnos y por ayudarnos en Generación Consciente. Sigo con el fundador de Capitalismo Consciente en Ecuador, que es Pablo Iturralde Barba, ex CEO y presidente de grandes organizaciones. Ha trabajado como consultor en negocios conscientes y liderazgo durante 18 años. Tenemos dos Pablos, así que me referiré a él por apellido. Pablo Iturralde, hola.
Ahí estoy.
Ahí estamos, ahí estamos.
Gracias, muy amable. En el grupo nuestro estuvo buenísimo. El enfoque en la parte interior, verse a uno mismo y este tema de los 4 pasos de Neja tuvieron un impacto fundamental. Esta dicotomía entre el corto plazo y el largo plazo, tal vez inclusive en el caso de Colombia, medir efectivamente si ese 88% de empleados no están enganchados en sus empresas y si esos 85% de empleados no les importa el trabajo. No son estadísticas de los Estados Unidos, pero más allá del Great Place to Work y la foto que uno quiere tomarse, ver si es que esto es una realidad. Un tercer aspecto importante fue avanzar desde lo colectivo, generar este ecosistema, en algunos casos afirmar que durante los últimos 10, 15, 20 años sí se han hecho cosas al respecto del tema de la conciencia en organizaciones que han avanzado al respecto de estos temas, pero que tal vez no han trascendido como debería ser, especialmente al mundo de los jóvenes. Entender como cuarto punto que hay una inequidad, es definitiva, ¿no? Que tal vez hay otros modelos, el europeo y algunos casos en Europa, en otras empresas que han hecho un trabajo importante al respecto de esto y que tenemos que generar esto porque hoy, que me fue también importante, las protestas sociales tienen más impactos que el terrorismo, ¿no? Es decir, el día a día de una protesta social tiene un impacto grandísimo y eso quiere decir que hay cosas que seguramente no están funcionando del todo bien. Y acabamos con un regalo que cada uno de los participantes le hizo a Juan Carlos Mora, y que básicamente se tradujo en la participación de cada uno diciéndoles que cuentan con el apoyo a Bancolombia, que realmente el ecosistema es fundamental avanzarlo, que tenemos que unirnos, pero con dinámicas que realmente se traduzcan en trabajo real. Inclusive uno de ellos mencionó que en su próxima sesión que hace con toda la organización, que es este 3 de diciembre, ya lo va a poner en práctica a estos temas, y ya va a lanzar este tema. Entonces, me parece que algo positivo en el grupo salió con la intervención de todos y sobre todo muy buen ánimo y un poco de bullying también.
Muy bien, Pablo, muchas gracias. A propósito de uno de los aspectos que menciona Pablo, cuando tengan la ocasión más adelante de preguntarle a Raj la opinión y el concepto que tiene de eso tan comentado en las empresas hoy en día, los millennials, es bueno que tiene una percepción muy particular y muy interesante. El otro Pablo es Pablo Jenkins, es director general de Andrómeda y cofundador de la iniciativa de futuros generativos en Costa Rica. Tiene también muchos años de experiencia trabajando en la innovación impulsada por el propósito y las inversiones regenerativas en los mercados emergentes, que son básicamente los mercados de los países que tenemos como base en estos encuentros de generación consciente. Pablo Jenkins, hola.
Bueno, me alegra mucho sentir que este valor colectivo estaba resonando en todos los grupos y estuvo muy fuerte en el nuestro. Sentimos esta invitación que parte de los participantes de Bancolombia resonaron de haber hecho este trabajo de propósito, pero de verdad desde uno de los temas que salió mucho es esta ética de cómo cuidarse, y fue interesante que salió muy cercano como sociedad, más allá de cada empresa, el tema que en América Latina muchas veces es importante y en muchas de las empresas, transgeneracional. Aquí habían grupos que habían hecho propósito y estaban trabajando, por ejemplo, en el protocolo familiar, pero también conectando con una nueva generación de adolescentes y pensando cómo podrían entender un legado más allá. Entonces creo que hubo un tema, tanto para algunos que eran dueños o que ya tenían varias generaciones de estar, pero estaban yendo más allá del grupo familiar, o algunos que como gerentes de grupos estaban entendiendo qué es el legado y cómo ese legado puede afirmar la libertad con propósito, para que ese papel que puede ser, y como lo decía Neja, del autocuido, haga que no sea nada más el miedo y el populismo el que vuelva a surgir. Entonces me alegró mucho que esto surgió tan naturalmente y que muchos están en estas diferentes fases de que ya habían empezado o avanzado procesos de propósito, pero lo están sintiendo que el compartirlo colectivamente es tan clave en un momento en que el saber cuidarnos entre todos requiere de esa libertad con propósito, para que no sea el populismo ni el cinismo el que deje con las generaciones que vengan un legado que tenga sentido. Entonces me entusiasmó mucho esta convocatoria de Bancolombia y el trabajo que en nuestro grupo siento que ya va muy avanzado.
Muy bien, Pablo, muchas gracias. Tenemos también con nosotros a Sebastián Ros, quien es cofundador y presidente de Capitalismo Consciente en España. Es un líder de pensamiento en el liderazgo, en la cultura y en la base de lo que estamos hablando hoy, los negocios conscientes. Hola, Sebastián, buenas tardes.
Hola, buenas tardes, un gusto. Nuestro grupo ha sido también animado y simpático. El foco ha sido más en la organización que el líder. Interesante. Se destacó solo unos aspectos que algunos ya se han mencionado. La importancia del largo plazo, poder trabajar esto con la perspectiva de muchos años, que no hay trade-off entre los stakeholders, que se puede satisfacer a todos. Da mucho ánimo de ver ejemplos también, ¿no? De que hay ejemplos, modelos de empresas que lo han conseguido. Pero también te dijo que tenemos que acelerar, sobre todo la parte del medio ambiente, probablemente es lo que apura más. Tenemos que pasar a la acción. La idea es fácil de entender y está entendida en estos círculos. Se ve este grupo, Generación Consciente, como también una gran oportunidad para dar un impulso a esta forma de pensar y sobre todo actuar. Al final hemos hablado brevemente de las particularidades de la región, de LATAM, con Europa o Norteamérica. Hay retos especiales que también se mencionó, ¿no? Partes importantes de la población todavía están casi más luchando con la supervivencia, y ser un consumidor consciente en estas situaciones no es nada fácil. Eso es un reto. Pero también hay aspectos que facilitan el trabajo, el hecho que hay menos empresas públicas, así que la presión para el corto plazo es menos, se puede trabajar más en el largo. Hay empresas familiares también, facilita el trabajo a largo plazo. Y en general se ven que la responsabilidad es también de las empresas, y por esto estamos aquí. Pero también tenemos la necesidad de apoyo político, algo también se mencionó, que necesitamos el apoyo de los políticos. Esto sería un muy breve resumen de lo que hablamos en nuestro grupo.
Muy bien, muchas gracias a Sebastián. Recuerden que a Neha, que ya la conocimos con la presentación que hizo, ella lideró el grupo 3. Y por último, en la 10ª de las sesiones, nos acompañó Susan Sopot, que es la expresidenta de Servicios de Negocios Globales de American Express y forma parte de múltiples juntas corporativas, y además, por supuesto, es una defensora de las mujeres empresarias y líderes empresariales, que sobre eso también Raj y Neha tienen unos datos muy interesantes. Susan, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. We had a very engaged group who were very evangelical around conscious capitalism concepts. In the interest of time, I will summarize that the key issues that were raised really had to do with how to implement and get very practical in putting conscious capitalism into play in both private, public, and government-run entities, as well as academia. So I think the quote of the day for us was, how do you take conscious capitalism from PowerPoint to powering people?
Okay, thank you so much. That was very short. Thank you. Y antes de terminar con la sesión, yo quisiera darle la palabra a Juan Carlos Mora para que él, si tiene algo que agregar a esta primera sesión que hemos tenido de Generación Consciente, haga un pequeño cierre antes de despedirlos y de invitarlos, por supuesto, a nuestra próxima sesión. Juan Carlos, por favor.
Muchas gracias, Jorge. Muchas gracias a Raj, a todo el equipo, a todos los facilitadores. Esa última participación de Susan fue muy corta, pero muy poderosa. Yo quiero que lo tomemos, y eso es como pasarlo del PowerPoint a darle poder a las personas. Creo que ese es el objetivo. Nuestro propósito es mantenerlos enganchados a ustedes en esto. Gracias por dedicarnos hoy 2 horas y media. Esto es importante. Mi propósito es que ustedes no nos abandonen durante estas sesiones y que logremos un trabajo colectivo que haga la diferencia. Piensen en eso, por favor. Cuando en la próxima sesión digan, uy, tengo otra cosa urgente que hacer, piensen que esto es importante y no se desenganchen de esto. Yo creo que podemos hacer la diferencia. Así que mi único llamado es, tengamos persistencia en este trabajo, y el trabajo colectivo de lo que podemos hacer es muy poderoso. Así que les pido que nos mantengamos como grupo trabajando en esto, no se desenganchen. La virtualidad tiene muchas virtudes, tiene algunas limitaciones, pero también permite que podamos tener mucha movilidad. Hubiéramos querido tenerlos a todos en un espacio físico para que no se nos volaran. Entonces, mi llamado hoy es, por favor, no se desenganchen de esto. Vamos a hacer todo lo posible. Tenemos un grupo de primer nivel global apoyando estas iniciativas, ayudándoles a ustedes y a nosotros a que construyamos un tema colectivo. Así que gracias por su tiempo, sigamos avanzando. Gracias a Jorge por la moderación, a todo el equipo que ha participado, y esperamos vernos entonces en la próxima sesión. Por ahora espero que todos estén muy bien y que se cuiden igual que sus familias.
Gracias, Juan Carlos. Como lo dice, y retomo esa parte de las palabras, es muy importante mantenerse aquí. La próxima sesión, el capitalismo consciente, no va de ninguna manera en contravía de lo que siempre han querido las empresas, que es tener empresas que sean prósperas, que generen riqueza y bienestar a sus públicos. Así que quiero finalmente agradecerles, además de a los participantes, a Raj y a Neha, quienes construyeron este programa para ustedes. Nos vemos la próxima semana, el 25 de noviembre. En esa jornada en particular vamos a comenzar a profundizar en el primer pilar del capitalismo consciente, que es el propósito superior. Que tengan todos un muy buen resto de día y gracias por dedicarnos este rato para hablar de Generación Consciente. Goodbye to Raj, to Neha, and to the rest of the team. Thank you. Goodbye.
Chao.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Bye, bye.
Muchas gracias.
Chao.
Muchas gracias.